táhachtach agus an rudí tá is gáú an rudí dhéanamh fuú freisin. Minister, this is a welcome piece of legislation, and I want to particularly paraphrase what my colleague, Sligo County Councillor Fergal Neal, said in the media this week. He talked about psychedelic nicotine pushers, and he was talking about shops in Sligo town that his own child was trying to get him to go into, even though they are vape shops, because in the windows, he said they're designed essentially like a cartoon shop or a Disney shop or something like that. They are 100%, whether I presume deliberately, but certainly they attract children. They attract those people, the children who are into that kind of shop front. The products in the window, there are toys placed next to these nicotine dispensing vapes. So the point that he's making is, why on earth, if you are selling these products, which are not supposed to be available to children under a certain age or children at all, why on earth, if you're selling these products, would you be marketing them in this way, if not to target that audience, which is not legal? And I think that's a really important motion. And one of the really important aspects within this bill is that we are going to attack that situation where we have an abusive process, in essence, by certain shops around the country who are definitely targeting younger audiences. And they shouldn't be, and that should be shut down. Now, I absolutely reject the argument made by some other speakers in the course of this debate that this is actually about choice and eliminating choice, and adults should be able to make choices about what they buy and what they consume in terms of the flavours and the colours and whatever else. You know, on the one hand, I don't have a problem with that, and the notion that adults can make that choice is a good thing. The difficulty is not that adults can't make that choice. The difficulty is that that space is being invaded by these psychedelic nicotine pushers to inveigle their way into not the adults, but the children. Now, at the moment, figures show that 13% of 12 to 17-year-olds in this country are using vapes. They are not previously smokers. They are children who have been persuaded by marketing and advertising to use these products. And all of the data suggests that they will go on not to avoid smoking, but to become smokers, because now these companies are forcing a situation where they become addicted to nicotine, and that habit will only grow from there. In contrast, only 7% of adults, as I understand it, in Ireland are using vapes. They are former smokers or reformed smokers, and I accept the role that vapes may play for smokers in reducing their dependence on a much more carcinogenic, as far as we know, product and getting them off cigarettes. That's fine. But what this bill has to be about is plugging the loopholes in the law that allow the traders in vapes to target younger audiences, to catch in that captive audience, get them addicted to nicotine, and then secure a market for life. We are where we were 70 years ago when it came to cigarettes, but there's an opportunity for this legislation actually to get in and stop this from happening now. And plugging those loopholes is a really important thing, because you'll be aware, Minister, of what are called big puff vape devices. And this is in exactly the kind of way in which these companies are getting around the regulations. The 2016 EU regulations make it clear about the limitations that can be used. The cartridges or tanks cannot exceed a volume of 2 millilitres, and the attachments then to the refill containers cannot exceed 10 millilitres. But these big puff devices are circumventing that legislation because they're allowing them to put together a product where you can clip on multiple different devices, which means that the actual device that you have is much more potent, but certainly much more voluminous than is allowed. But they're getting through a loophole there. So, Minister, can you assure me that this legislation is going to put in place plugs for all those loopholes to make sure that there isn't a situation in a year's time or 2 years' time where we have put in place all of this legislation, we are trying to protect children in particular, and then you have a situation where people find a vehicle just to circumvent it. And now, that's a difficult ask, I know, because the whole point is we're trying to see down the future and see around every corner. But what's really important is that we avoid situations like that. And is there anything in this legislation, for example, that's going to deal with big puff devices? Big puff devices, which I think also circumvent the legislation we passed just weeks ago in terms of the single-use devices, because although they're technically not covered by that legislation, as I understand it, they're frequently discarded afterwards. So they create the same environmental impact that the single-use devices do. But the big thing about the big puff devices is, because they're selling a greater volume, they do so at a lower unit price, and so there's a financial incentive for people to use the big puff devices instead of using the standard ones. So, coming back to where I started, Minister, the big thing about this for me is that we currently have a situation where there are what I would consider to be irresponsible retailers. I know we don't criticise people, and I won't name anyone, but every member of this House has in his or her constituency a vape shop like this on a main street somewhere, which is clearly designed in a way that you would not expect to be consistent with cigarettes, and you would not expect to be consistent with vapes that are aimed at adults. What you actually have is shops that are clearly designed at a different or targeted at a different audience. And honestly, it's not acceptable, because we know from other exposés that have been done by the media, we know that children are getting into these vape shops. They're buying products they should not have access to. We know that 13% of the teenagers, the underage teenagers in the country, are vaping. Let's stop that. Let's make sure we have a situation where we're saying it is not okay to target your product, which is potentially carcinogenic, is certainly bad for them, and is definitely going to encourage them to smoke. It's not okay to target that at kids. We've got to stop it, and we've got to make sure that they act responsibly. Come on.